I didn't believe in possession. Not really. I grew up in a house where the most supernatural thing we owned was a cracked gravy boat my aunt swore was haunted, and even that turned out to be a draft, making it wobble on the shelf. I was a paramedic for 12 years in a mid-sized Ohio city, and I'd seen enough to know that the human mind can break in ways that look exactly like demons. Schizophrenia, temporal lobe epilepsy, carbon monoxide poisoning. Every time a family called 911 screaming about a possessed child, I'd walk in, find a cornered, terrified kid with a fever of 104, and pack them into the rig for a very mundane ride to the ER. Demons were a story we told ourselves because the real explanations were too sad. But then I got called to the Miller house on Sycamore Lane. It was a Tuesday night in late October, the kind of cold that feels wet against your skin. The dispatcher said it was a respiratory distress, a woman in her late 40s, possible asthma attack. Standard stuff. I was partner with a new guy, Tim, who kept fiddling with the sirens like a kid with a new toy. We pulled up to a 2-story colonial with a perfect lawn and a single lit window upstairs. The front door was unlocked. That was the first detail that stuck with me. In my experience, people with respiratory problems don't leave their doors wide open for the cold to pour in. We walked in calling out, "Medics!" and the house answered with silence. Not the normal silence of people hiding, but a thick, dead quiet like the walls were listening. Then I heard it, a low, rhythmic thumping from upstairs, not footsteps, something heavy and regular like a meat tenderizer hitting a cutting board. Tim looked at me with wide eyes. I motioned for him to follow, and we climbed the stairs. The master bedroom door was open a crack. The thumping was louder here, and it had a wet, percussive pulse to it. I pushed the door open with the toe of my boot, expecting a seizure, a fall, maybe a woman beating her own head against the floorboards in a psychotic episode. Instead, I saw something that stopped me cold. A middle-aged woman in a floral nightgown was kneeling on the floor in the center of the room. Her wrists were bound behind her back with a telephone cord. Her head was bowed forward, and her dark hair hung over her face. But she wasn't the one making the noise. Her daughter was. A girl about 12 years old. The dispatcher had said the daughter called 911 was standing over her mother. She was maybe 4'10", wearing pink pajama pants and a white t-shirt. Her hands were clasped together in front of her chest, and she was jumping. She would rise up onto her toes, then come crashing down with both feet directly onto her mother's back. With each landing, the woman's body buckled and the wet crunch echoed through the room. I lunged forward and grabbed the girl by the shoulders, pulling her away. She didn't resist. She just let me move her, her body limp and light as a doll. Her face was blank, eyes open but not seeing. The mother was still breathing but shallow and ragged, each inhale wet with broken things. Tim called for backup and started working on the mother while I kept hold of the girl. I sat her on the edge of the bed and knelt in front of her, trying to get her to focus. Hey, sweetheart, look at me." Nothing, her pupils were fixed and dilated, but the light still made them contract. She wasn't on drugs, she wasn't seizing, she just wasn't there. And then she spoke. It wasn't a child's voice. It was layered like two people talking at once, one voice vibrating beneath the other. The words came out slow and deliberate, like she was reading from a script she'd been practicing for years. She told me I was a monster. I pulled back, my hands were shaking. I've had guns pulled on me. I've had a patient die in my arms. I've held pressure on wounds I knew belonged to a dead man. None of that prepared me for the venom in those words leaking out of a child's mouth. The mother coughed and blood came up. Tim was shouting something about a spinal injury, calling for a board and a collar. I heard sirens in the distance. I should have been helping, but I was frozen, staring at the girl. Her eyes tracked me. First time they'd moved since I picked her up. "You don't have to be afraid," she said in that same split voice. "It's not for you." The police arrived. The girl was taken to a separate hospital for evaluation. They found nothing physically wrong. No brain tumor, no infection, no toxins. She was a healthy 12-year-old who had, by every medical measure, simply chosen to assault her mother while reciting phrases that would make a prison chaplain flinch. The mother survived barely. She had fractured vertebrae, a punctured lung, and 3 cracked ribs. She was in intensive care for a week. When I visited her, she was awake, but she wouldn't look at me. She stared at the ceiling and whispered the same thing over and over. She told me I was a monster. I didn't think much more about it after that. Cases like that get filed away under trauma-induced psychosis, and you move on. You have to, or you drown. Then 3 months later, I got a call from the Miller house again, same address. Same dispatcher tone, respiratory distress. Same cold, wet night, same unlocked front door. This time I walked in alone. Tim had quit the job 2 weeks after our last call to the house. He said he couldn't sleep. I thought he was weak. The house was different now. The warm family energy was gone. The walls felt greasy and the air was thick with a smell I couldn't place, like wet fur and burnt sugar. The thumping was back, but it wasn't coming from upstairs this time. It was coming from the basement. I radioed dispatch and asked for police backup. Then I went down. The basement stairs were old concrete, the kind that sweat in summer and frost in winter. They were clean, too clean. The walls were scrubbed white and the floor was poured epoxy, gleaming under a single naked bulb. The only furniture was a wooden chair in the center of the room, and tied to that chair was the girl. She was strapped down with the same kind of telephone cord. Her wrists and ankles were bound tight, the plastic cutting into her skin. She was wearing the same pink pajama pants. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were different now. They were bright, alert. They locked onto me the second I reached the bottom step. She smiled. "I knew you'd come back," she said, and it was her voice this time, just a little girl's voice. I asked her who tied her up. She didn't answer. She just looked past me toward the stairs. I turned, and there was the mother. She was standing at the top of the basement stairs, a cordless phone in her hand. Her face was blank. She looked like she hadn't slept in months. Purple crescents hung under her eyes, and her lip was cracked from nervous picking. She didn't speak. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. I'm going to cut your daughter loose." "No, you're not." It was the mother's voice, but it was. It was the same layered, split thing I'd heard from the girl months ago. Two voices, one human and one wrong. She came down the stairs slowly, one hand trailing along the wall. She stopped a few feet from me and held up the phone. "I didn't call 911, she said. "She did. She's been calling for a month. Every time I tie her down, she calls you." I looked at the girl. She was still smiling. "I need you to leave," the mother said. "You're not on my list." I asked her what list. She didn't answer, but the girl did. "The list of people I can hurt," the girl said and giggled. "You're not on it yet, but you could be if you stay." I backed up the stairs. I didn't run, but I didn't walk either. I was on the lawn when police arrived. I told them what I saw. They went in, talked to the mother, talked to the girl. They came back out a half-hour later and told me there was nothing to report. The mother said she had an anxiety attack. The daughter was fine. There were no restraints, no phone cord, no chair in the basement. The basement was empty. I filed a report. It was dismissed. No evidence, no corroboration. Just a paramedic who needed a vacation. But I couldn't stop thinking about what the girl said. "You're not on my list yet." I looked up the family history. The mother and daughter had moved to town 6 years ago after the father died. He died in a basement. He was found tied to a chair with telephone cord wrapped around his neck. The coroner ruled it suicide. The mother said he'd been depressed. The daughter was 7 at the time. I found the daughter's old medical records. At age 6, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for severe behavioral disturbances. The file noted she would speak in multiple voices and was resistant to therapy. The discharge summary said she had a marked obsession with control. They released her after 90 days. That was the same year the father died. I should have let it go. I should have moved on. But I kept thinking about the mother, tied up on the bedroom floor, whispering the same words her husband must have whispered before he died. She told me I was a monster. I started driving past the house at night, just to see. The light in the upstairs window was always on, the silhouette of a small figure standing in the glass. Watching, waiting. I don't know why I agreed to meet her. She called my cell phone at 2 a.m., a number I didn't recognize. It was the girl. She asked if I wanted to see who was really in charge. I told her I wasn't scared of a 12-year-old. She laughed, and the line filled with static. Then she said 8 words I can't forget. "You're on the list now. You came back." The call ended. I looked out my window. The Miller house is 2 miles away. But there at the end of my driveway, a small figure stood in the dark, wearing pink pajama pants, arms folded, waiting. I'm writing this from my kitchen table. The sun is coming up. She's gone, but the door is unlocked. I never left it unlocked. She's already inside, isn't she? I think I've always known. The demon doesn't enter through the mouth. It enters through the fear you feed it, and I've been feeding her for months. I can hear footsteps upstairs now, soft, deliberate, and a voice layered, split, wrong, whispering from the hallway. I knew you'd come back.